I am the descendant of a Confederate veteran who fought in the Red River campaign. Henry Gray's 28th Louisiana Infantry. Alfred Mouton's Louisiana Brigade. Richard Taylor's Army of Western Louisiana, and Kirby Smith's Army of Kansas. I am the descendant of a Union naval veteran who served in the Red River Campaign under Admiral David Dixon. Woohoo! Yay! See, here's the thing. After the war, the Yankee naval guy stays in Louisiana. And then the Southern guy and the Yankee guy don't know each other, but their kids do, and they marry. And then their kids, they're known as the Halls, they marry the Robinsons. And their kid is Ada Robinson, my grandmother. She marries Joseph Kennedy, my grandmother. And they have a bunch of kids, one of whom is my mother, Mary Lillian Bijan Kennedy Prushankin. My mother, happy Mother's Day in heaven today. All right, the Red River Campaign, 1864, the only campaign in the Civil War that has everything. Navy, infantry, cavalry, politics, espionage, internal dissension, insubordination, profiteering, trade with the enemy, war against civilians, blacks fighting for the Union, blacks helping the Confederates, artillery duels, mass infantry assaults, sweeping cavalry charges, even infantry fighting against gunboats. Go figure that out. That's a book, Red River Campaign by Ludwell Johnson. I'll get your books at the end. But the basic point is this: the Red River Campaign, yes, they're military stuff. It's mainly about politics and cotton. So the 5 areas that we will cover today are the origins of the campaign, the U.S. advance and Confederate retreat, the pivotal battles, although we're not going to get into the bullet by bullet stuff, the U.S. retreat and Confederate pursuit, and then the consequences. I circled my PowerPoint slides notes here so that I do. Henry W. Halleck, we talked about him yesterday, so I won't go into too much depth. Lincoln's general-in-chief from 1862 to 1864. He devised a framework for a campaign in Louisiana, using the Red River as the primary avenue of approach, and the Red River Valley as a staging ground for the invasion of and conquest of Texas. Halleck, as was discussed yesterday, is considered a military expert. Let's point to class 39, old brains. But the other side of that is, there were those who said, well, what he did was make war on a map. And Lincoln called him a first-rate clerk. Very nice. It might be pretty accurate. Because he emphasized planning, logistics, and conceptualized campaigns. And this campaign, as early as November of 62. And in 63, the parts of these plans went into effect through central Louisiana. So we get to age of 64, and Lincoln appoints Grant as the general-in-chief. And Halleck, he takes over from Halleck, and Halleck becomes chief of staff. And Grant brings with him a shift in strategic concepts. Grant's strategy is this: we're going to launch simultaneous attacks, simultaneous assaults. All Union armies will move into action at the same time against Confederate armies at different positions. By doing this, we, the Union, will prevent the Confederates from using interior lines to concentrate troops. That's a pretty good plan. And ultimately it worked. Grant will operate in Virginia. Lee's army will be his objective. Sherman will operate in Georgia with Atlanta and Joseph Johnston's army the objective. And in New Orleans, Nathaniel P. Banks, the Department of the Gulf, he will capture Mobile and then move to Alabama and join Sherman. Other U.S. armies will engage other Confederate forces to prevent them from reinforcing Lee or the others. Well, anyway, we're not talking about Mobile today. So what happens is that this strategy gives way to political and economic influences that will essentially supersede military considerations. Lincoln does not follow Grant's plan when it comes to taking Mobile. Instead, he follows Halleck's plan. He instructs Nathaniel Banks to ascend the Red River and capture Shreveport, secure Louisiana, control Arkansas, then move to Texas. PowerPoint map of Grant's Mississippi. Okay, why does Lincoln do this? He's under pressure by several factions and factors, political and economic special interess. There's three primary reasons. Number one, cotton. The cotton mills in New England, 3/4 of them are shut down. 500,000 workers out of work. This is not only bad for the U.S. economy, it's bad for the Republican Party. You see, industry, textile industry, provided a key base of Republican political and economic support. They had hoped that the United States military could procure cotton from Louisiana and Texas and not have to rely on unscrupulous speculators, some of whom operating with permission from Lincoln. See, Lincoln was essentially fighting the enemy and trading with the enemy. The speculators were the middlemen. By 1864, cotton was selling for nearly $2 a pound in Boston. And through the cotton trade, the Confederates had gained somewhere between $20 and $30 million in medicine, ammunition, supplies, etc. Plus, there's all this corruption and profiteering going on, even among the government officials. And the demand soared and the price was going up. So the point is this, the thinking is this: if the United States military can get control of the cotton, if the government can function as the middleman, if the government can procure and deliver cotton to the mills, then cotton mill owners will to the Republicans, the cotton mill workers would vote for the Republicans, the textile related businesses would support and vote Republican. This would all be a positive thing. Factor number two, Napoleon III had established a puppet government in Mexico under Emperor Maximilian. This French presence violates the United States Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine says foreign powers, European powers, cannot set up shop in this hemisphere. Fine. But beyond that, as discussed previously, the Confederates secured trade routes through Mexico. Cotton going to Britain and France in exchange for munition, metals, and so on. And the trade leads the French, especially because of Mexico, so start to reconsider recognition of the Confederacy. Now, the United States fears that the French and Mexico may reacquire parts of Texas and Louisiana. The French have 25,000 troops there. The Confederates may agree to cede territory to Mexico, and by extension French, in exchange for recognition and support. This is not true. It doesn't matter that it's not true. The United States thinks it's true. Factor number three, the 1864 elections are on the horizon. And Lincoln has a Reconstruction plan that he's already attempting to put in place. It's called the 10% plan. When 10% of the voters in a state from the 1860 election, when 10% take an oath of allegiance to the United States, then they will establish a reconstructed state government. with full pardons, restoration of all property except slave property, of course. And Lincoln then seized Louisiana as a laboratory for Reconstruction. Oh, plus the fact that Louisiana's electoral college votes would go to Lincoln. Texas electoral college votes would go to Lincoln. Arkansas electoral college votes would go to Lincoln. So Lincoln, there's no guarantee he's going to win re-election in 64. He needs that political support. Next. This is not the clearest map in the world, I'm aware of that. But what the purpose of this map is, I'll only keep that here briefly, so you can drawing. The military plan of operation is a pincer movement. The main arm is moving up the Red River, from New Orleans up the Red River, right? And you've got a contingent coming in down from Vicksburg and then across, that's going to be coming from Sherman, and then you have another coming from Arkansas and Steel. So it's a pincer movement aimed at Shreveport. Right? Okay. Now, Banks and Porter. Nathaniel P. Banks, selected to lead the expedition. He's a political general. No military experience. Ties to the cotton industry. Served in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, governor of Massachusetts. He aspired to the presidency. He thought, hey, you know, I could win in 64. I ain't go down with this. He was appointed Major General of Volunteers in May of 61. Many soldiers were unhappy that they had some amateur politician, but Banks's political acumen and rhetorical skills were key. He served as Corps Commander under Stonewall Jackson in the Valley in 62 and suffered a humiliating defeat. I mean, he lost all kinds of supplies to the Confederates, gained the nickname Commissary to the Confederacy. He was relieved of command in September, and Lincoln sends him to New Orleans, then to command the Army of the Gulf. There were numerous administrative and bureaucratic duties there, and Banks is good at that. There were also many Union recruits from New England and New York. They could theoretically relate to Banks. The victory at Port Hudson in 1863, that was fine. In the fall of 63, there's an aborted campaign into central Louisiana that falls apart. So Halleck really pushes for this in 64. Banks doesn't particularly want to do it. Banks wants to go to Mobile, but he's got his instructions, so he prepares for the Red River campaign. Here are the components then. Banks will lead 33,000 men. And the force will consist of the Union 19th Corps under William B. Franklin. Franklin is a professional soldier, first in his class at West Point. He's a Democrat. Banks is a Republican. Franklin has the Democrat ideology of war, more meticulous, cautious. He had a quick rise to command, but a sluggish performance at Fredericksburg sort of did him in. He took a lot of the blame. When Joseph Hooker was appointed commander of the Army of the Potomac, he was a Republican. Franklin didn't like him. Franklin resigned, and he was reassigned to the Department of the Gulf. Banks also has 5,000 cavalry under Albert Lee, not the guitarist, Albert Lee, the New York lawyer who moved to Kansas. No real military experience. I mean, once you get in the Civil War, they get some military experience, but he's not a professional soldier. And his cavalry consists of mounted infantry. They are not real cavalry soldiers. They are inexperienced horsemen. A detachment of the 13th Corps under Thomas E.G. Ransom, heard about earlier, a New Englander, civil engineer, moves to Illinois. No real military experience. 2,500 United States colored troops, the Corps d'Afrique, no real military experience. 1,000 Marines under Brigadier General Alfred W. Ellett. He's from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Hey, that's where I'm from. And just like me, no real military experience. He moved to Illinois as a teenager. 10,000 men borrowed from Sherman's 16th and 17th Corps under a professional soldier, finally somebody with military experience, Andrew Jackson Smith, professional soldier. He's also from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Buckingham Township, that's where I live. Who would have thought? Well, anyway, West Point, that's 38. Experience in Missouri, experience in Mississippi, brigade command and so on. Division command works his way up. Army of the Tennessee helped capture Arkansas Post. Corps command in the Vicksburg campaign, and now 16th Corps in the Red River campaign from Sherman's army. He's a no-nonsense, tough guy. Now, I should note that Sherman approved of the Red River campaign, but he wanted to lead it. Sherman had worked and taught at school in Louisiana. He lived in Louisiana. He knew Louisiana. He did not want to serve under Banks. Technically speaking, Banks outranks him. He's not going to serve under Banks. So he sends A.J. Smith. Banks also carries with him 90 artillery pieces. Okay. Army's mission, drive the Confederates away, gather the cotton. Banks knew many cotton merchants, north and south. Many were in New Orleans. Many came to New Orleans from New England and New York. Many were authorized by Lincoln. And they will accompany the campaign. They will work closely with Banks. Another part of the mission is to install unionist local governments to help facilitate the 10% plan. Great. Reduce, the third component of the mission is to reduce the Confederate military-industrial complex at Shreveport. Fun. Fourth is to occupy and secure territory in Louisiana so that you use that as staging ground to go into Texas. What's missing from this list? The destruction of the Confederate Army. I mean, that's last on the list. That's not among the primary objectives. Now, Banks' army will be accompanied by the largest fleet ever assembled in North America, 60 ships, mostly ironclads, the Mississippi Squadron, under the command of Admiral David Dixon Porter, a veteran, hard-nosed naval officer. I don't go into all of his history, but he's the real deal, Porter. And here's what else is the real deal about Porter. He wants the cotton. You see, under naval prize laws, cotton captured by the Navy, it's the Navy's to keep and sell and do whatever they want. At least one cotton speculator wrote to Lincoln and said, do not send Porter. His reputation, his unscrupulous conduct. Anybody but Porter. The result is this. We have a competition between Banks and the Army and Porter and the Navy. A race. Who's going to get the cotton first? This is not good. This is not conducive. Well, we'll get to the U.S. Army's non-conducive war in just a second. But trust me, it's not good. Third arm of the pincer, the one coming from Arkansas, that's Frederick Steele. He'll move from Little Rock with 15,000 men. Basically, he's going to operate an independent command. They will meet up in Banks and Shreveport. Steele is a regular Army career officer. He has little tolerance for Banks. Steele's a Democrat. He has little tolerance for Republicans in the Army. So, summing it up, we have two large Army groups, one accompanied by the Navy, moving, converging from different areas on Shreveport. Shreveport is the objective. Let's see. There it is, the U.S. Army's 954. Now I'm just going to break down some of the Red River Campaign components, and you can plug them in here wherever they fit. Jomini and Clausewitz and all of that. Okay. Overall, the plan is poorly conceived. Weak, non-military objectives. Yes, destroy the Confederate center of gravity at Shreveport, but that objective is secondary to and a consequence of cotton and politics. Next, poor generalship. You have a second tier of generals, particularly 19th Corps Franklin. There's no unity of command. You've got a bunch of amateur generals in key positions. There's no interior lines. There's no element of surprise, no security. Confederate spies had notified Taylor and Smith well in advance of what was going on. There's no simplicity in the plan. There's too much distance, poor lines of communication, ignorance of terrain. These guys don't know what they're getting into, where they're getting to. Unstable logistics, vulnerable columns. You got columns stretched out in hostile territory that you don't know. That's dangerous. Factor in competition between the Army and the Navy. You've got a toxic mix in play before the first boot hits the ground. And all of that ignores the other component, the friction of war. When you engage, anything that can go wrong generally does. After the first shot of the battle is fired, throw the plans out and wing it. All right, a brief look then at the Confederates. There he is, Edmund Kirby Smith. The Kirby Smithdom commands Confederate forces in the region. We talked about him at length yesterday. He owes a debt to the Arkansas and Missouri politicians for his promotion and his command. He's got good administrative skills, but he also has this thing where he wants that battlefield glory. His subordinates are Sterling Price, also a politician in general, John B. Magruder, or West Pointer, and most importantly, Richard Taylor. Taylor was well connected. He was Jefferson Davis's brother-in-law. Imagine that. Taylor's sister married Jefferson Davis. Now she died shortly after, but still, he and the president are like this. Taylor earned his stars under Stonewall Jackson, and until Kirby Smith starts to take over operations in Trans-Mississippi, he had operated basically in command. Kirby Smith has 30,000 troops. They're scattered across about 3 states, cut off from Richmond and Cincinnati. Okay, next slide. Oh, that's Richard Taylor. Oh, good. I'll leave him up there. Kirby Smith instructs Richard Taylor to fortify Fort DeRussy. It's on the Red River just below Alexandria, Louisiana. And Kirby Smith said, or believed, this is our Gibraltar on the Red. Federals aren't getting that. He garrisons the fort with 300 troops. Taylor scoffs at the entire idea. March 7th through 8th, the campaign begins. It's, let's see, campaign begins. It is 5 to 6 days behind schedule. The Army advances north. Lee's cavalry leads the way, followed by the 19th Corps, elements of the 13th Corps. On March 14th, Porter and A.J. Smith's corps capture Fort DeRussy. destroy Fort Jerusalem. Thus much for our Red River Gibraltar, scoffs Taylor. And, calls us, well, now what do you want? Please, call Pompey. Smith, retreat! Retreat, fall back towards Shreveport. Retreat along the Red. Keep an eye on them, but fall back. Concentration in Shreveport. Let's see. I'll leave this up for now. Use interior lines to concentrate at Shreveport, and then we'll defeat whichever column is the greatest threat. This is fine, but it does require Taylor to surrender territory. He doesn't like that. And the point is that the greatest threat is in Louisiana. The threat from Arkansas is not really materializing to the same degree. Taylor protests, and Smith says the only field of great results is in the Department of Arkansas. And the reason why, for Smith, is this is a political payback. That's what he wants to do. Smith wants to do. He wants to concentrate in Shreveport, and then he wants to whip those guys in Arkansas first. Well, regardless of what Smith wants to do here, strategically, this doesn't make this policy of concentration a bad idea. Concentration through of force through interior lines makes it easier for a smaller force to defeat a larger force. You engage the enemy, a portion of the enemy, with your entire force, and then you turn around and engage another portion of the enemy, and then you can defeat them in detail. Still, the greater danger is at Taylor's front, and he begs Smith for reinforcements. He begs Smith for permission to take the offensive because Banks's column is strung out. But Smith refuses. I have no troops to spare. Avoid battle, fall back to Shreveport. March 21st, A.J. Smith sent a reconnaissance ahead, and the mission captured Taylor's entire cavalry at a place called Henderson Hill. The cavalry commander, William Vincent, escaped capture. He snuck out the back. And it was said by a couple of sources, he escaped wearing a bathrobe and slippers and hid out. I mean, I can see the guy with fuzzy pink slippers. Anyway, this leaves Taylor blind, and after that sight, I would Taylor had no cavalry, he's got no eyes. Now, how's he going to figure out what's going on? He's been asking Kirby Smith, send me Tom Green's cavalry from Texas. All right, I'll send it. They are slow in arriving, which is not good. And Taylor, in his correspondence with Smith, he keeps saying, when Green arrives, I'm attacking Banks. I don't care what you say. Smith keeps saying, look, I just don't have the manpower to send you to support such an attack. Then a March 26th letter arrives to Taylor's camp. It's from a Louisiana politician, Duncan Kenner, who is also Taylor's brother-in-law. From Kenner, Taylor learns that Smith has been holding a division of infantry under Thomas Churchill, Arkansas and Missouri infantry. He's been holding them at Shreveport for days. Taylor's been asking for reinforcements. Smith says, I don't have any. Well, yeah, you do. Taylor demands an explanation. And he's pretty nasty about it. And he renews the threat. I will take the offensive. As soon as good for life. Kirby Smith is more angry at Duncan Kenner for sending Taylor the information than he is at anybody else. Meanwhile, back to Banks. Banks' dog. He's installing governors and mayors in the different towns and factories. I mean, but that's his political mission. On the day the army marches into Alexandria, Banks steams into, along the river, aboard his flagship, Black Hawk. So Banks arrives at the same time his infantry is marching in there, and Banks is 7 days behind schedule. Right? And Banks is accompanied by all of these cotton speculators on board the ship. This is not a good image to project to the soldiers. Plus the fact the Navy had arrived a week earlier, and they had already begun their cotton procurement operations. There were hundreds, thousands of bales of cotton that the Navy already had on the wharfs ready to put on board the ships and send out. The cotton was stamped CSA, but what the Navy did is they stamped USN under it to make sure nobody else would get it. And the Navy said what that means is the Cotton Stealing Association of the United States. Both branches send out wagons and scouting parties, and I mean now it's like a race for the cotton. Scour the countryside. This is dangerous business, to tell the truth. Dangerous business. Union infantry parties in particular go missing. They have to send out parties to find them. They find them hanging from the trees. Others are devoured by alligators or panthers. There's poisonous snakes out there. There's spiders and scorpions. I'm not going out there. I'm from New England. We don't have that stuff. Louisiana is, as one said, a howling wilderness. Why do we even want them in the Union? Banks assembles his army of 33,000 in and around Alexandria, and Taylor retreats upriver. He's outnumbered 6 to 1. He moves towards Natchitoches. It's up there to the upper left. Natchitoches, they call it in Texas, but we're not in Texas. Natchitoches. Taylor makes his headquarters at the plantation home of one Carroll Jones, a very wealthy Southerner who happens to be a jeune de couleur, a free black man who supports Taylor and Confederate. Meanwhile, in Arkansas, Sterling Price retreats ahead of Steele. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in Arkansas. I spent 3.5 years there with my wife. Meanwhile, rumors begin to emerge. Smith wants to concentrate in Shreveport. Jerry Lyons, well, that's not a rumor. But then Smith, the rumor starts to come out that he's going to take all the reinforcements and personally lead them to victory. Arkansas would be preferable, but if it's in Louisiana, I'm still going to Louisiana. I will become known as the savior of the state, the savior of the department. Taylor not happy about it. Meanwhile, the Union force pushes its way up towards Natchitoches. The cavalry arrives March 31st. Porter anchors at Grande Cour, that is just east on the river. The last Union column leaves Alexandria for Natchitoches on March 28th. The column stretches 25 miles, that's 40 kilometers. Banks remained in Alexandria to the last moment, supervising elections, inaugurating politicians. All of these political concerns are utmost important to his mission. Let's see. Well, that's a Trans-Mississippi Department, so I'll leave that up for a second because I have to go to another slide in a minute. It's just next on the list. Taylor decides he is going to move inland away from the river. See, Natchitoches is on the river. Now, and you're looking square in the middle of the map. Now you see inland, Pleasant Hill, Mansfield, and then Shreveport's on the river. So Taylor is going to move inland, away from the river. He will still send parties out to monitor what's going on, but he just feels it's more secure there. Here's where Banks makes a critical error beyond accepting this mission in the first place. April 3rd, he arrives at Grande Corps again aboard his flagship Blackhawk, again accompanied by all the cotton speculators. Again, a bad image for his men. And now, Banks makes this key decision in the campaign. He fails to reconnoiter the road network running to Shreveport along the river. There's a stagecoach road, same one Taylor took, running inland toward Shreveport. That's a more direct route. So Banks orders the army to march along that route, march away from the river, away from the protection of the fleet, and directly towards Taylor. This is a bad idea. Look at that. There's your line. The inland road is narrow. That's not an actual photo. We need that. It's narrow. It runs through the woods. And these are some deep woods when you get into the woods and down. There's no, you can't send out flankers. You can't deploy artillery or use cavalry. Porter objects to Banks' decision. He said, look, you're marching away from logistical support. You're marching away from tactical support. I'll send out an armed reconnaissance to reconnoiter the road network. Banks refuses. He doesn't even want to hear it. No, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. He's worried about time. He's already notified Washington he would be in Shreveport by the 10th. Got to get going. And Banks' marching order makes it even worse. He puts the trains of individual units behind those units. So it's going to make it difficult to concentrate in the event of trouble, which is Porter wrote to Sherman, he said, it struck me very forcibly that the river road would have been the best route for the army, where they could have traveled without all the immense train, the country supporting them as they proceeded. The roads are good, wide fields on all sides, a river protecting the right flank of the army, and gunboats in company. An army would have no difficulty marching to Shreveport in this way. So Porter continues upriver. Banks holds more local elections, marches inland. They will rendezvous at Springfield Landing. But as they're moving, Porter begins to express increasingly concerns about the level of the river. The river is falling. This can't be good. Why is this happening? It's happening because Kirby Smith ordered the sinking of a ship called the New Falls City. Below Shreveport, on the river, of course, where you sink the ship. Each side of the ship rests on a bank, and the rest of the ship is right in the middle. He's creating a dam to bring the water level down, hoping to prevent Porter's fleet from reaching Shreveport. Meanwhile, Taylor moves through Pleasant Hill, about 25 miles from Natchitoches. That's 40 meters. 40 kilometers. No, it's meters. No, kilometers. We can get there. And then he moves 16 miles further to Mansfield. When he reaches Mansfield, Kirby Smith, got to have a talk, rides down to meet him. So look, you're not going to attack anybody. You're going to fall back to Shreveport. If Banks reaches Shreveport, we'll stand siege in the city. Either that, or we'll just go to Texas. That doesn't sit well with Taylor at all. He does not agree to any of those things, and he challenges Smith. Partially as an attempt to mollify Taylor, Smith will send Churchill's infantry halfway to Mansfield. Keachai. All right, well, we're close enough. And he will give Taylor operational control over the infantry. Greene has now arrived, for the most part, and Taylor sends Greene out on a reconnaissance mission. Go down towards the river, see what's going on. April 7th, 3 miles above Pleasant Hill at Wilson's Farm. That's 5 kilometers away, above Pleasant Hill. The cavalry engages Union cavalry for a 3-hour battle. Greene falls back, but the intel that he brings Taylor is crucial. Greene explains the situation. Banks is moving away from the Red River. His general advance is coming along the Stagecoach Road inland. The column is vulnerable. We can bring mass against a portion of Banks's force. Banks will not be able to reinforce in time. He will not be able to get his entire force up there to confront us. So Taylor plans to trap Banks below Mansfield. Mansfield is key strategic point below Shreveport. You see, if you see the dot that says Mansfield, you can see there are 3 roads leading to Shreveport. If the Confederates get Mansfield, then they can move each infantry component along a separate road. Plus, one of the roads will reconnect with the fleet. It will make it easier for Union columns to support one another. If there's any problems, it will be easier to resupply. And it's really the road network that convinces Taylor that Mansfield is the place where he must stop Banks. Taylor has about 800 men, and yet Smith has ordered Taylor not to fight. So Taylor calls a conference war that night, the night of the 7th. And he meets, not with everyone, but he meets with Henry Gray, Louisiana, brigade commander. He meets with Alfred Mouton, Louisiana, division commander, both politically interested as well. And he meets with Tom Greene, his cousin, cavalry. And they hatch a plan to disobey orders and to offer battle at Mansfield. They expected the Federals to attack, and the way Taylor arranged the troops was to envelop the Union attack. Now, to cover themselves, Taylor sent a courier to Smith saying that unless I receive positive orders to the contrary, I will give battle at Mansfield. So he's going, unless you tell me not to, which you've been telling me all along, unless you tell me not to, I'm going to fight Banks at Mansfield tomorrow. And he's careful to send that courier out, a courier who knows the lay of the land. He knows all the back roads. He knows the slowest way to take to get to Shreveport, so that by the time Smith gets the message, he really won't have enough time to send a response. April 8th. 1864. Lee reported of the cavalry engagement on the 7th. He reported to Franklin Banks, and Franklin instructed Lee to continue the advance to Mansfield. You got to move forward so I, Franklin, can get out of Pleasant Hill and allow A.J. Smith's force to come up and get into it and pass Pleasant. So on the morning of the 8th, Franklin discusses this with Banks, and Banks agrees. But on the morning of the 8th, Lee is struggling to advance to get to Mansfield. The narrow roads are bad enough. But once the road empties onto a place called Honeycutt Hill, just below Mansfield, The Confederates are there, and they are open for business. 800 yards, that's 731 meters across the field. 1,200 yards flank to flank, that's 1,097 meters. So Banks, the Lee gets up there and he sees this. His courier, go back. Tell Franklin, tell Banks, tell him what's here. The Confederates are here. I'm not taking another step. Franklin's in a meeting with Banks. Franklin, all right, I'll send another brigade from the 13th Corps, but there will be no fighting. The rebels have been retreating the entire campaign. We don't expect any trouble. Banks figures, okay, I'm good, but I'm going to go see what's happening. He rides to the front. He doesn't get to the front. Lee meets him behind the lines and says, we can't go forward with this. So Banks says, all right, just hold. And Banks can see enough of it. Hold, I'll talk to Franklin. Sends word to Franklin, hey, you better push more infantry forward. And then Banks will ride back and have a meeting with Franklin. About 3:30 or so, Lee gets word from Banks, and it says, continue to Mansfield. And Lee wrote, we couldn't advance 10 minutes without a general engagement in which we would be most gloriously flogged. I did not want to do it. As more and more U.S. troops begin to arrive, U.S. lines begin to extend and start to push forward. Taylor compensates by extending his lines, and they begin to push forward. Skirmishing intensifies. Mouton asks Taylor for permission to attack. Taylor can't wait because no reply has arrived from Smith yet, and when it does, it's going to say, don't fight. Taylor says, go, and Mouton goes. The Confederates would outnumber the Federals at the point of attack. The Federals have 12,000 men coming up, but they're not there yet. There's maybe 5,000 there. The Confederates have 8,800. As Mouton opens the battle for the hill, Walker swings into action. So the fight holds an echelon. And once the fighting gets underway, Taylor gets a courier from Smith, and the message says, do not hazard a general engagement. And Taylor grabs the message, reads it, and says, too late, sir, the battle is won. Well, not quite. But after about a half hour or so, the Federals begin to retreat. They fall back to a second position. And there, Franklin and Banks arrive, along with reinforcements. Still, the Confederates outnumber the Federals at the point of attack. Now, the Union commanders have been marshaled them, and deservedly so. But despite their poor judgment, they really did a good job at the battle in terms of rallying their troops, inspiring their men, riding among the men, exposing themselves to fire. And Franklin was wounded, had to be carried from the field. And the Federals hold for about 90 minutes, and then they break. And it's a stampede. You thinking about First Manassas, you'd be thinking correctly. One soldier wrote, men without hats or coats, men without guns or accoutrements, cavalrymen without horses, artillerymen without cannon, wounded men, bleeding men, and crying at every step, all in a state of fear and frenzy. The teamsters panicked. They couldn't turn the wagons clogged the roads. A journalist accompanying the mission wrote, we found ourselves swallowed up, as it were, in a hissing, seething, bubbling whirlpool of agitated men. 2 miles from the battlefield, U.S. reinforcements from Emory's Division 19th made a stand at Pleasant Grove. By this time, the Confederate pursuit has become disorganized. Mouton had been killed at Honeycutt Hill. Taylor's buddy, one of his most trusted subordinates. And the Confederate soldiers are grabbing the spoils of war as they're pursuing the Federals. The Confederates will secure the water supply at Pleasant Grove, it's Chapman's Bayou. And without the water supply, the Federals can't stay there. They have to go back to Pleasant Hill, and they do. Again, Banks is a commissary for the Confederacy. A lot of the captured wagons had signs on them that said Austin, Houston, Galveston, indicating they were planning to go to Texas. And this makes Taylor's men, especially the Texans, really mad. Confederate soldiers ridiculed many of the Union prisoners. In particular, there was a group of Zouaves, and some of the Confederates said, well, we got to fight a war against women, it just ain't worth it. The Confederates captured a supply of dress white paper collars. You know, the paper collars that people put in their dressing room. So Taylor writes a message and sends it across the line that says, we've acquired a large supply of these from your wagons. We have boiled them, baked them, stewed them, fried them. We don't know what to do and would like to exchange them for hard bread. Now, following up a victory is something that very few Confederate or very few Civil War generals did. Taylor follows up the victory at Mansfield. He's already angry with Smith. He's already angry with the destruction of Louisiana. And he knows he has an opportunity to defeat Banks. He knows Banks is at Pleasant Hill. He knows the character of his commander. He knows the terrain at Pleasant Hill. He's been there. So 1:30 in the morning, he draws up plans for an attack. It's basically the same plans as he had at Mansfield, except Churchill's fresh division is now going to be in there, and Rutan's division, now under command of Cognac, will be held in reserve. But Taylor thought he was only fighting the 19th Corps. He didn't realize that A.J. Smith was coming up and into Pleasant Hill. Now, the morning of April 9th, Franklin sent his trains and Lee's cavalry back to Grand Ecore. This indicates that Franklin believed the army was in full retreat. Banks is unaware of this. Banks didn't order that. Franklin did. Remember the whole unity of command, U.S. Army principle? Here we go. Banks didn't order a full retreat. If he did, why would he remain at Pleasant Hill? Why would he engage at Pleasant Hill? He could have fought a rear guard action and been done with it. Wasn't it? The short version here is initially Pleasant Hill as a success. The battle starts about 4 o'clock. Initially, it's a success. Walker strikes the center, Green's cavalry on the left, the initial attack, and Churchill is supposed to come in and roll up the Union left flank using the woods for concealment. But Churchill makes a mistake. There were 2 roads that ran parallel. Churchill was supposed to take the second of those roads. He took the first. So when he comes up and strikes the Union position, he's coming up on the wrong flank. And he is exposing his flank. It shows it as his front here. But he turned too soon, and he's exposing himself to A.J. Smith. So A.J. Smith will roll up Churchill, and the Confederate line will collapse on itself. 4 hours of fighting. It's a tactical U.S. victory, but it is a strategic Confederate victory. That night at Taylor's campfire, Kirby Smith arrives. He's angry that Taylor's disobeyed orders and engaged. He shows up and Taylor laying down drinking coffee at the campsite. Bad business, General, bad business. Banks will be on you at first daylight tomorrow with his whole army. Taylor takes another sip of coffee, another pull off that stogie? I don't know, General. He said, if you listen, you'll hear Banks's artillery moving out now on their retreat. And Taylor was right. Banks had begun a full retreat after Pleasant Hill. Therefore, Pleasant Hill is a strategic victory for the Confederates. Taylor has just broken the first arm of the pincer. Banks's generals, most of them, except A.J. Smith, advised him to retreat. A.J. Smith wanted to stay. Remember, A.J. Smith, West Point, Pennsylvania, Bucks County. Buckingham County. Smith said, at least let us stay long enough to bury our dead. The Confederates had sent across a flag of truce to collect their dead. So Smith said, at least Banks won't even let him bury his dead. That ain't right. A.J. Smith goes to Franklin, and he's steaming, and he says to Franklin, I propose we arrest Banks. The men will support the decision. I mean, the soldiers distrust Banks, especially now. They had been jeering him more and more, and now it's going to get, they've been calling him Mr. Banks. You know, it's innocent, it's in general. They've been calling him Napoleon P. Banks. Franklin glares at Smith and says, Smith, don't you know this is mutiny? Smith backs. Porter writes to Sherman after he heard about Pleasant Hill. He says, an uneducated soldier may be cool and pleasant enough in the hour of victory, but the true general is best known in the hour of defeat. General Banks lost all his prestige, and the men talked so openly of him that our officers had to check them and threaten to have them punished. Well, what's happening with Porter, meanwhile? April 10th, Porter's got 6 gunboats and 20 transports up at the Springfield landing near Malaga Bayou. That's the port for Shreveport. And I'll just let Porter tell you what happened. When I arrived at Springfield landing, I found a sight that made me laugh. It was the smartest thing I ever knew the rebels to do. They'd gotten that huge steamer, the New Falls City, across the Red River, 1 mile above Malaga Bayou, 15 feet of her on each side of the shore, the boat broken down in the middle and a sandbar making below her. An invitation in large letters to attend a ball in Shreveport was kindly left, stuck up there by the rebels. An invitation which we were not able to accept. There's no sign of Banks. Porter looking around. Finally, a courier arrives. Return to Grand Ecore without delay. Banks has been defeated. Porter writes, the rebels were soon aware of our turning back and were after us like a pack of wolves. Now, Taylor wants to pursue Banks after Pleasant Hill, but Kirby Smith orders him to send 2/3 of his force, Walker and Churchill, to Shreveport, where Kirby Smith's going to take him to Arkansas. Taylor protests. Says as soon as Steele learns of Banks's retreat, he will call off the campaign and go back. Smith says, well, maybe so. But if he does, then I'll send the guys back. And just to be sure, you can accompany the expedition. So Taylor, get ready, all right. Before leaving for Arkansas, Smith learns that Steele is indeed retreating. He promptly rescinds the offer to Taylor to accompany the mission and says, I'm not returning the troops either. I'm going after them. Now Taylor truly is steaming. Smith races after Steele. He catches him at Jenkins Ferry on the Saline River. There's a battle there on April 29th. It's a tactical victory for the U.S. But Kirby Smith claims victory despite losing 1,000 men because Steele withdrew from the field. Well, of course he withdrew from the field. He was going that direction anyway. All he did was put up a rear guard force to keep you from trailing him. And then when that was over, they left anyway. They were going in that direction, whether Kirby Smith had shown up or not. But what does Kirby Smith call it? The most brilliant and successful campaign of the war. Walker's Texas division lost all 3 brigadiers, 2 killed, 1 wounded. On May 3rd, Kirby Smith released the Texas troops to Taylor. It's going to take a while to get down there. But before departing, he addresses the troops and he praised them for their glorious and brilliant success at Jenkins Ferry. The path to glory is still open for you, he tells them. The Texan writes, path of glory leads to the grave. Walker will not arrive in time to help Taylor. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, Greene's cavalry is attacking Porter's fleet. They're the wolves as they retreat down the river. At Blair's Landing, Confederate troopers on horseback leap from the shore or swim and then mount the decks of the ships. You've got cavalry fighting the Navy on board ships. Union fire will kill 7, including Tom Green. This is the second friend, trusted, and skilled commander Taylor has lost in just a few days. April 12th and 13th, Banks and the fleet arrive at Grand Ecore and they begin fortifying the place. See, they don't know that Kirby Smith has taken Taylor's army, so they're expecting Taylor to attack. The guys are sort of walking out and all this stuff. Porter, looking for Banks, he finds him. Banks is sitting in his tent, reading the book called Hardy's Tactics. Right, that's a tactical manual. Porter says to him, you know what? You should have studied that book before the campaign. Some generals discuss, that's true, man. Some generals discuss regrouping and continuing the campaign. Others want to continue. Nobody trusts Banks. Banks sends orders up to Steele. Join us in Louisiana. Steele, by the time Steele gets him, it doesn't matter, but he gets him, Steele didn't tear them up. Banks receives a letter from Sherman. You must return A.J. Smith to me now. And so now Banks decides he will have to abandon the campaign. April 21st, officially, he retreats to Alexandria. The column stretches for 20 miles, 32 kilometers. I actually looked those up. Just forget to mention. I don't know what PowerPoint slide I'm on. Maybe I'm on the next one. Well, I'll get to Bailey in just a second. What you guys think about? Just a real, I don't want to get into the combat issues, but during the retreat, Banks will commit another blunder. He will actually march his columns onto an island on the Cane River. So Taylor's, even though Taylor's got a small force, he's got these guys on an island. Actually, if he had his full force, they could have captured them. A group of slaves living on the island, show Banks's men a ford, a little used, little known ford, as a way to get off. The Confederates hadn't covered that position, so they're able to escape. Fight is called Moonet's Ferry. In any case, the real ordeal is Porter's. The fleet is struggling. On April 27th, hey, that's what I'm looking at first. April 27th, they reach Alexandria, and they find that they are trapped by the low water level of the Red River. Half the fleet's above the falls, half the fleet's below the falls. Banks, he sees what's going on and he's going, you know what? We're just going to go. I mean, you're going to get yourself out of this. Leaving Porter to Taylor's mercy. And remember, the Federals believe Taylor's got his whole force here. The rumor is that when Porter heard this, he threatened to open fire on Banks's army if they attempted to leave. Banks pledges to stay. He says, all right, I'll stay. And Grant sends orders for A.J. Smith to stay too, because I think Grant realizes A.J. Smith's the only one that's worth it. There's still an opportunity for Taylor, despite the fact that his army is taken away. But the river is at 3 feet 4 inches, not quite a meter. And Porter needs 7 feet, just over 2 meters. Up steps Joseph Bailey, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Bailey, Chief Engineer of the 19th Corps. Civil engineer from Ohio who moved to Wisconsin and constructed dams for Wisconsin lumbermen and so on. Bailey knew of the falling water level during the campaign, and he began devising a plan to raise the water level. We'll build dams. We'll build dams to raise the water level. He took the plan to Franklin. Franklin says, all right, here, go see Porter. Porter's not impressed. Go away. Now Porter's stuck. And Bailey again goes to Franklin and says, you know what? Porter was kind of like not very friendly. Maybe I should talk to him. So Franklin again sends him to Porter with instructions. Hey, read this and bring this to Banks's attention. We got to do something, and we got to do it now. So Porter's interested. Pitched the idea to Banks. Banks is not very hopeful for his success, but he orders work to begin on construction of the dams. 3,000 men begin felling trees and disassembling buildings and all this stuff to build these dams. Eventually we'll have 10,000 men working 3 shifts around the clock to build these dams. That's pretty good. Wing dams are going to come in from each side of the river, converge in the center, then we'll have barges anchored to the riverbed in the center. The river, by the way, 758 feet wide, that's 231 meters. The Confederates, under Polignac on one bank and Liddell on the other bank, will harass the construction crews. Taylor essentially had these Federals cut off from outside assistance, but there was no way without Taylor that he would be able to actually capture the army or the fleet. But he's hoping Taylor shows up at some point. On May 9th, May 8th, the river goes to 5 feet. That's 1.5 meters. And on May 9th, 2 barges broke free and water rushed down the river. 4 ships sailed through the breach. But we still got to get the level up a bit more, so we've got to plug that gap. And here's the thing, the Navy has not been doing any of this construction. So Banks goes to Porter and says, you got to get your guys to help. If you don't, I might leave again. And Porter says, all right, I'll get my guys to pitch it. So now the Navy's going to have to. Now, just to step back to the very beginning when we were talking about Howard. At the highest levels of the Union command, there are discussions about not only was Banks a mistake, but maybe we should relieve him now. Halleck called it a military necessity. He acknowledges there will be a risk of political fallout because Banks the politician in the Cotton Dynasty. But he wrote, it seems but little better than murder to give important commands to men such as Banks. By May 13th, Bailey had repaired the dam and the remaining ships passed over the falls. By the time Walker arrives, the escape is. A.J. Smith's men are the last to leave. They will go through the town of Alexandria and they will smear all the buildings with various flammable substances and loot what they can from shops and homes and burn Alexandria. A.J. Smith riding around, hurrah, boys, this looks like war. All right. Sherman's guide. Taylor will contest Banks' retreat a couple other places, Marksville, Mansoura, Yellow Bayou is the last fight, and these are just rear guard actions essentially. Banks' army crosses over into safety, fleet crosses into safety. The Red River Campaign is a great success story of the Civil War for the Confederates. But Taylor considers it a disaster because of what has happened to the state and because of what Kirby Smith did. He sends a series of scathing letters to Smith. He says to Smith, "You have robbed the army of the just measure of glory, their just measure of glory, and the country of its most brilliant and complete success in the war." He condemned Kirby Smith's bureaucracy and leadership as all ruffles and no shirt. And he said, "This is an opinion shared by every intelligent officer in this army." Smith writes back and says, these letters are objectionable. Smith replies, he said, "The truth is often considered objectionable by superiors." He says, Kirby Smith has turned the fruits of Mansfield to dust, and says the grave errors you committed may be repeated if the unhappy consequences are not kept before you. On June 10th, Smith removes Taylor from command and places him under house arrest in Nashville. But Taylor, Jefferson Davis's brother-in-law, connections out. Taylor will receive a promotion to lieutenant general and a commendation from Confederate Congress for his work in the Red River Campaign. He is reassigned to department command in Mississippi and Alabama. Now, the U.S. side is no better off than it could be worse. Banks was heckled by his troops. I mentioned Napoleon P. Banks and all of this stuff. He's removed from command. His military career is over. His political aspirations over. You are not getting the Republican nomination like before. The Army lost 5,400 men, 57 guns, 822 wagons and supplies, and 3,500 animals. You are not getting that presidential nomination. Franklin also received blame. Franklin's wounds were such that he will not resume a field command. Porter had boasted that he could take his fleet wherever sand was damp. Evidently not. He comes under criticism. The fleet sustained millions of dollars worth of damage. 9 ships, 28 guns, 200 casualties. A.J. Smith is disgusted with all of them. He embarks on the Meridian campaign where he will perfect his technique of burning civilian homes and shops. 4,300 Confederate casualties. The Confederates lost 3 steamers and 700 animals, but they gained 25 guns and 600 wagons. Kirby Smith comes under harsh criticism for the campaign. He's accused of taking payoffs for cotton. And Henry Gray, remember him from Mansfield, he is elected to Confederate Congress. He goes to Richmond and he spearheads an investigation into Kirby Smith. He never can prove that he's a crook, but it raises enough questions about his ethics and his military judgment. So, do I have anything else? I think I do. Yeah. If Taylor destroyed Banks and Porter, could he have influenced events east of the river? Yeah, he could have influenced them. I don't know if it would have changed the war. He might have influenced the Atlanta campaign in 64 election. So certainly would have bolstered the Confederate drive. Still, the Confederates won the campaign. Taylor wins a reputation. Smith, Banks, Porter, Franklin, they lose a reputation. So despite, or perhaps because of the Confederate victory of the last war, the Red River Campaign is often slighted in its significance. You know, if the campaign had happened in the East, it might have been seen in a different light. But it is truly one of the most significant and interesting campaigns of the war, particularly when you filter in the politics and cotton angle. And here are 3 books. This one, of course, is a wonderful author and Ludwell Johnson's Red River Campaign, Politics, Cotton, and War is just a fantastic read. He wrote that, it began as his dissertation, and he was interested in the economics of the war. And that is just a fantastic book. This is Gary Joyner. He is a fantastic historian of Louisiana, LSU Shreveport. I highly recommend that as well. And one other thing I wanted to point out, you see the jacket here is the Confederate battle flag, but the colors are reversed. The battle flag of the Trans-Mississippi, that's what it looked like. It was blue with a red cross across it like that. So Gary found one. I believe it belonged to a Texas unit, and he put that in a book jacket. And Gary's book has a foreword by Ed Lars. So anyway, there you go. That's it. Thank you all. Appreciate it very much. And happy Mother's Day to my wife. I gave her a T-shirt from the